So I wanted to talk to you today about earned link strategies. And I've realised what I've done is I've made a bit of an assumption in that I've assumed that everybody here understands the importance of acquiring links. So it'd be really helpful if I could understand how many of you are actually working in SEO currently? Cool. Is there anybody that's not working in SEO and that would like to get into SEO? We're hiring. Sorry, that was a total setup. So earning links, and why might we want to do that? So for years, absolutely years now, search engine spokespeople have been telling us that the best links are the links that we earn and links that we're not paying for. So not manipulated, not placed, no forum spamming, no comment spamming, no directory spamming. But that's only part of the story, obviously, because they're not telling us the magic formula. How do we earn these links? And there's a lot of myths around that. This is my favourite one. It doesn't work for website traffic. Anybody that's ever tried to grow traffic for a website knows that just having a good site is not enough. And the same is true for content. Creating good content is not enough. Making engaging content, there's no such thing as engaging content because we need an audience to engage with it before it becomes engaging. So again, just having that content itself isn't enough. Having a video doesn't make it a viral video because it's got cats in it or because it's funny. Viral is what we hope for. It's the rate and method of distribution that we would really ideally like to have. But of course, the video itself is just the mechanism. And of course, I think this has been mentioned certainly by Lisa, but not every piece of data needs to be turned into an infographic. Just having a spreadsheet doesn't mean we need to get excited about that. Nobody ever shared anything because it was made in a nice, pretty font, apart from a small, hardcore community of web designers. So instead, I'd like to suggest that earning links is actually a three-phased process. And that's why SEO isn't dead, despite what people say. Because, of course, we still need people to create great content. And that's becoming much more of a remit for SEO agencies. And, of course, we still need to get that content distributed. We still need to get it to the attention of an audience to share it socially. Or we need to get that content to the attention of a writer. But what we do need to do is evolve and embrace the ideation stage. We need to be able to think about content that comes from a story, from a genuine story. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. So we're going to have a look at what makes something newsworthy. Obviously, that's relative to an audience. So if we're working for clients in concrete or the semiconductor industry or something that people might say is actually quite boring, there's, for everything you can think of, there is trade press of it. There's all sorts of things like Cabinet Maker magazine, Semiconductors Monthly. There is always going to be an audience, no matter how boring you might think your product is. We're also going to have a look at what makes something remarkable, what make it share-worthy. And I want to talk you through the ideation process that we use at my company, the Media Flow, how we kind of get together and brainstorm with our clients to uncover all of the different assets that they've got. And there are some operating frameworks that we do need to be aware of because this is much more of a marketing approach or a PR approach. So there might be some things that we might need to be aware of, like CAP codes and PRCA guidelines. And also this does involve some rate of organisational change, particularly for traditional SEO agencies that might have things like volume targets for links. So let's look at why we really need to embrace earning links. 82% there, that's the average rate of visibility drop experienced by the top 100 losers when Panda first hit. That's a hell of a lot of space. 3.1%, that's the number of queries affected by Penguin 1. 2 months, that's the length of time that it took the SEO agency iAcquire to get themselves back in the index after they were accused of buying links. As to whether or not they were, I'm not going to say, but they were accused of buying links. That's an SEO agency, not their client. They were removed from the index. 73. That's the position that Google, I like this one. This is a position that Google Chrome found themselves in when they gave themselves a PageRank penalty for for engaging in a sponsored posts campaign. So they were previously #1 for the term browser, and then immediately, a couple of hours afterwards, after the story arose, they dropped to position 73. And finally, 700,000 love letters sent this time last year in just the space of 2 months. You know, those wonderful notice of detection of unnatural linking emails. Okay, never heard of them. Okay, you genuinely haven't heard of them. Oh, well, that's really good. If you haven't, that's fantastic because you're doing everything right. Essentially, Google sent out hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of emails, 700,000 of which were sent in January and February to webmasters via webmaster tools, alerting webmasters that there are natural link practices, mechanisms at play in their link strategy. And for those that didn't remedy that warning pretty quickly, a short, sharp drop was often experienced. And if they weren't mopped up manually, then when Penguin hit, that was then played out algorithmically. So you were lucky if you didn't get one. So those are the negatives, but let's look at the positive reasons for embracing this change. First off, diversity, of course. And again, this is something that Lisa mentioned. If we're constantly talking about our product and trying to create content out of the fact that we make gravel or whatever our product is, we're going to run out of ideas at some point. So by looking at all of the stories we can create, looking at all of our business assets, we can actually uncover themes that are relevant to different audiences. We can diversify, get links from a broader spectrum. And of course, if we're getting genuine links come from people, like Dixon said. Links are about relationships. People link, not robots. Well, they do, but they're the bad links. And with people linking comes audience. Where there's a writer, there's someone reading. The other advantage, of course, is that it reinforces the brand story. So if I'm telling a link, or if I'm telling a story, which includes a link, about our ethical policy, that gives us that warm and tingly feeling inside and convinces us that this is a company we might want to buy from or we might want to do business with. So I'm going to give you an example to sort of illustrate that. Innocent Drinks, I'm sure you're all familiar with Innocent Drinks, the company. They make smoothies, but they market not so much on the product. They do have some product statements and policies about the ingredients, but they mainly market on their ethical standpoint. Their sustainability programs. For example, in India, the mango farmers are all kind of working to a sustainability quota, improving carbon efficiencies and making sure that their farms can be viable for future generations. They're also involved in charitable projects. So you might have seen bottles around winter last year wearing little woolly hats. So it's all about kind of engendering a sense of community and charity. And if you contrast that marketing message to a brand like DFS, their marketing message is, we've got a sale, we've got a half-price sale, we've got a flash sale, 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 sale. And that's not really giving you the warm and fuzzies. It's not much of a broad message. It's also the kind of message you've got to pay for. It's an advertising strategy. It's not a content strategy. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do that. It's, of course, something that works for that business in that sector. But if we want to earn links, if we're working with a business, or if our only selling point is having a sale, we're going to struggle. So let's talk about what actually is newsworthy, what makes the news, what would a writer want to take in terms of a story from us, and what's going to get us the sexy links. Something is newsworthy, first off, if it is quantifiable, and we're really obsessed with this as people. It's kind of intrinsic in human nature. Anything that is first to market and innovation is immediately newsworthy, of course. The smallest, the largest, in one of these examples, the most expensive sandwich ever, has got thousands and thousands and thousands of results for that particular piece of content. But we're not always lucky enough to have this amazing invention. If we've just invented 3D printing, that's possibly one area where build it and they will come. You don't really need to tell much more than that. But we're not all that lucky. We can't all hit on the next big thing. Another aspect of making something newsworthy, perhaps a kind of dour comment on culture today, but it's the cult of celebrity. If we can afford to get some kind of paid endorsement, so the example at the bottom there, Activia with GOK1, that's a paid celebrity endorsement. If we've got budget for that and it's right for our brand, that really can do wonders to create content off the back of, and that content will get repurposed and will get reused. But that's not always the case. However, if you don't have budget for that sort of thing, but perhaps you've got a cause, then a cause can often be something that's really valuable for somebody with an allegiance to that cause to support. So in the example with David Attenborough there, he lends his support to the British Humanist Society, which is a new organisation that aims to get rid of creationism in schools, obviously. And it's not being paid for that, it's something he fundamentally believes. And Jamie Oliver will support anything, really. anything to do with making food better for kids. So it doesn't have to be a paid incentive. If you can find somebody that believes what you believe too, and it resonates with them, there's a mutual benefit with that, which you can use to your advantage. And the third point is emotive content. This is a real kind of skill, and it's a whole topic for another day. So I'm going to show you a book that I recommend after this. But using emotive content is something that really resonates, and I think socially in particularly. Paddy Power are fantastic at this. If you're involved in social media, follow Paddy Power, sports betting company. They do social better than pretty much anyone I've ever seen. They have this never-ending John Terry meme where whatever's going on, so Black History Month, and there's John Terry taking the credit for the I Have a Dream speech or whatever it might be. Or, I mean, there's loads of them, and it's extremely fun. Then they won't let him live it down ever. There's SEO Moz doing the Harlem Shake in their office. So emotive content doesn't have to be reacting to something that's newsworthy. It can be riding the wave of something. It makes us all feel good. It makes us feel included. We get the joke. Or it can be outrage. Emotion doesn't have to be positive. We can be morally outraged of Milton Keynes. And that's Ryanair's only strategy, really, is to create moral outrage. And that, of course, it brings the links flying in. If you use Majestic, have a look at Ryanair's backlink profile, because you'll see the biggest spiky graph that you've ever seen. Go to Google News and do a Google News search for Ryanair stories, and you can correlate those link spikes with every ridiculous news release that Ryanair ever put out. It's blatant. So I'm gonna leave emotive stories for now, but I just started reading this book last week. Thoroughly recommend it. It's fantastic. It's by a guy called Jonah Berger, and he's professor of marketing, online marketing, at Wharton Penn in the States. And this is fantastic. He's taken data from pretty much anything that happened socially in the past 2 years, like Rebecca Black, like all of that kind of stuff, and actually analysed from a data perspective what made it catch fire. And he's identified 6 steps in that. So social currency, does it make us richer? So we all retweeted that post that Joe put out about Google embracing SEO in the heart of Google, because it makes us look great. We were there at the time. We're part of the in crowd, that sort of thing. What are the triggers for it? So like the John Terry meme, is there an actual newsworthy item where John Terry makes a global tit of himself? That's the trigger. Let's iterate on that. Is there ease for emotion? Is it in the public domain? Kind of, I agree with this, but then I think there's a lot of in-jokes within communities as well, and having that element of inclusion is also valuable in and of itself. And having something of practical value. Has anybody seen something that's going around the past 2 days about awesome furniture that kind of slots into any space? It's really cool. You've seen it, check that out. So content that makes our lives a bit better, or there's like 100 life hacks. Have you seen that one, which has got all sorts of cool things like using ring pulls to collect your coat hangers together to save wardrobe space, all that kind of thing. And of course, the story behind it, and that's what I really want to get to. But like anything in SEO, we love a good process. Yes, it's marketing, but underneath it's underpinned by computer science. So we need some nice stages in this. And I want to share the process that we use at the Media Flow. And this process, first off, is qualitative. So our research methods for technical SEO are always quantitative. We want huge swathes of data, and we want a massive Excel spreadsheet, and that makes us feel good. But for the more creative side, we need a qualitative process. We need to actually sit down in front of our clients and talk to them. Or we need to sit down in front of our colleagues and talk to each other, particularly if it's our business we're marketing, or we've just created an awesome product, we want to get it to market, we want to get some stories out there, we need to talk to each other. Because it can be quite difficult trying to tease something, a story out of someone. Give me 10 reasons you're the best X in the world. But if you can kind of talk somebody through that process, you can get a lot more detail out of that. Of course, that does need some senior level buy-in because you need people there. You need the head of HR to tell you about the people working for the business. You need the head of corporate social responsibility there to talk to you about that. So you do need a lot of people around a table. So let's talk about product, identifying the stories in our product. As I've already said, we might not be lucky enough to invent 3D printing. Maybe our product is gravel, or maybe our product is cornflakes. Everybody's got that. It's pretty boring. So we might not be able to innovate on a USP about the product explicitly, but perhaps we can innovate, or perhaps we can create a story around our customer experience, something that Moo Cards does extremely well. Maybe we've got the best retention rate. That's our point of uniqueness. A good way to do this, is anyone familiar with Google Consumer Surveys? Cool. Now this launched like Q3 in the UK last year, obviously. We haven't had it yet this year. It's been around the US for quite a while. What you can do with consumer surveys, it's a bit like using AdWords, but instead of putting an ad out there, what you're doing is you're putting a survey out there. So it's using the display network, opt-in publishers. And the advantage for the publishers, if they want to gateway some premium content, then they can gateway it with a survey question. It's a bit more money for them than simple AdSense, whatever it might be. So I'll show you an example. Okay. So you can see your demographics. So let's say I'm working for a firm of accountants and we produce information about your reporting responsibilities as a salary payer. Dull as shit. So if I'm working for an accountant, what am I going to do? I'm going to try and create a story about that to engender some interest, to give my story, to give my product and my information some cred. So let's pick a target audience. I'm going to target business owners. So I'm going to make a bit of an assumption here that they're roughly 35 plus. And I'm going to ask a qualifying question. Are you a business owner or an employer? If so, proceed to survey. If not, whatever. And then I can ask them a simple survey question. Are you fully prepared for RTI, the real-time information reporting, which is actually happening in April? If you're an employer, you'll know this. And so from that, I can get my results. So let's imagine with me that 79% of all our survey respondents are not yet ready for RTI. That's my story. So my product is boring. I provide information about getting ready for RTI, but now I've created a story on which to hang this content. So that's the ideation stage. Next, I create my content, and then I distribute a press release, or I phone up a suitable media point and I say, we've got some great data. It's credible because it's from a Google survey. There you go. And my tip for making sure that you get the link when you're placing content like this is hold something back, because otherwise there's not that much of an incentive for a writer to link to you. If you give somebody a story and then say, can you put a link on a website? There's no good reason there. So if you keep some content back, something of additional value. So in this example, I'm imagining that our firm of accountants has created a 10-step checklist to make sure that as an employer, you're ready for this change. Okay. And for ubiquitous, by ubiquitous, I'm being kind, I mean boring products. So for boring products, where everybody's got this, here's another kind of technique you can use. And I'm using, this is a real example from Kellogg's. So 2008, 2009, heading towards recession, and sales of Kellogg's cornflakes are heading down because it's a recession. Who's going to buy big brand products if you've got kids to feed, you know, you've been made redundant, when every single supermarket in the whole country sells the same product? It's just a cornflake. So Kellogg's came up, or they actually revisited what has been a core policy for them forever. And it's that we don't make cereal for anyone else. That's the policy, that's the difference. Yeah, you've all got cornflakes, but we don't make cornflakes for any other supermarket, retailer, whatever. So that's the ideation stage. What they did there was pretty cool. They created a method of laser branding every single individual cornflake that's produced in their factory. Has anyone actually noticed? Anyone had cornflakes the past couple of years and thought, oh shit, what's that? It actually says Kellogg's on the individual flake. But there's a reason behind that. So that's the creation stage. Now you know. So that's the creation stage. And then the next thing we do is we distribute. In this case, they use PR Newswire to send out a press release. If you do a search now for laser branded cornflake or Kellogg's cereal, we don't make cereal for anyone else, something like that, thousands and thousands of results from every single online media point you care to imagine, even the Daily Mail. So your product needs a USP, that's a given. And if we don't have a USP, that in and of itself, there's a few tips there on how to do that. And again, just a little more for those products that are a little dry. So boring products can have a human application. In fact, they always do, because we don't just make things for no reason. And it can be policy or service oriented. But my big tip for boring products is to take it to the human conclusion. So for example, if I've got a client that makes thermostatic control systems, little resistors, doesn't get more boring than that. But what are these integrated circuits actually used for? Well, we sell them to medical equipment manufacturers to create infant incubators. Cool. How many hospitals do you supply? 100. How many incubators per hospital? 100. How many premature infants each year are in your incubators? Hundreds. Then we've instantly got an amazing story about how our products are inside the things that save lives. So if you've got a product that's boring, take it to its logical step. Where does it end up? Where are the humans? Let's talk about ethics. Ethics, Lisa mentioned ethics actually. Innocent drinks, again, get a plug. Incidentally, you probably know this, but they're now wholly owned by Coca-Cola. Not so warm and fuzzy anymore. But using ethical policies or a company's ethical standpoint is actually a brilliant way of diversifying your link profile. And it's brilliant for more than just that, more than just the link. It creates a sense of responsibility within the organisation and a nice sense of inclusion and job satisfaction, which is great. But on the outside, that means we can create lots of feel-good stories, and feel-good stories are easier to fly. And like Lisa said, there is so much media out there gagging for content on this. You can earn the links, but you can also attract good employees, and you can also attract customers, because it's kind of that emotive loop that we're closing there. But, oh, a little quick there. So a couple of examples here. Maybe I make trainers, maybe there's not enough to say about my shoes, but perhaps I deliver my product in a kind of awesome, sustainable, recycled package, which stacks on top of each other in this safe space, saving, sorry. That then becomes the story rather than the product itself. And there's also like hundreds of awards, hundreds of media out there that you can enter for. And it doesn't have to be groundbreaking. It doesn't have to be national. It can be something as humble as your own company right to work scheme. And that can be really interesting to local media websites. But the real important thing is, if we do this after the fact, try and make something up a bit green just to get links, that's going to be hollow. And that really could backfire. So to develop an ethical policy, it has to be something that's going to be baked into your business. It's got to be what you're about. And data. Okay. I think we've kind of bashed the infographic a little bit, haven't we? But just to come back to that. So these are all mechanisms. An infographic is a mechanism. Slides, these PowerPoint slides that you're looking at, graphs, data viz, these are just mechanisms to get the actual story to our brains. And these mechanisms are useless if there's no story behind the actual data. And that's what I want to talk to you about. I saw this guy speak. This is Ed Parsons, head of geospatial tech at Google. He's cool. There's a blog post on our site about it if you're interested. Just search Ed Parsons Media Flow or something like that. But he had some great stuff to say about what Google considers big data to be. And having worked for a search engine, I completely agree with him that actually the thing that makes data really interesting is the third dimension. It's the velocity, it's the density, rather than the actual data points itself. Kind of need to illustrate that, so I will. This is one of the best examples I've seen about genuine big data or using a data property to create a story or tell a story. These two guys are, which university? I think it's UCL, Professor Ed Manley and James Cheshire, his postgrad doctorate student. And what they did is they took every single tweet around the Greater London area around the time of the Olympics. And they analysed the language in every tweet. So you've got a couple of data points. You've got tweets, number of tweets, language of tweets. That's just rows of data. What made it interesting was looking at the physical density of tweets by location. That's the additional dimension. And there were some awesome stories in there. For example, Bengali was not represented at all. And Bengali is one of the most widely spoken non-English languages in the whole of London. Second point was the second most represented language was French, which was a surprise for the researchers. But what was more surprising, I'm just pointing southwest there, that big red blob, that's Lewisham. French people in Lewisham. They couldn't really explain why there was such a huge density there. And another very interesting point, Malay, was the 9th most widely tweeted language in London at the time. But it's one of the most underrepresented languages in the world. So that was quite an unusual data finding. So my tip for finding stories in your data is to think about that third dimension and create what we like to call metametrics. And a metametric is kind of what you might think of as a summary metric, something that sums up. So at Yahoo, we would look at QPS, queries per second. You could always tell when a celebrity had died because your QPS rate would just go boing. And it looked like you were under some sort of sophisticated attack, but really it's people just go search, 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 search. Twitter, of course, tweets per second. That's how Twitter identified Twitter trending topics, so like the Hudson River landing. So create a set of metametrics and then work when you see an anomalous pattern in that. So I'll show you an example. We work for a publisher who tasked us with pulling apart the Amazon algorithm, but that's another story. And a metametric that we used when looking at book sales was sales per hour. So we looked at all of the sales history and we thought, okay, so what's normal sales for these particular titles? And, you know, sometimes it'd be like 0.8 of a book per hour. I'll just have the first few pages, please. No. So it could be one book, you know, 2 books an hour, etc. And we thought, okay, so what's abnormal? Probably like 10 sales an hour. That's interesting. And we found with this particular book, Salt, Sugar, Smoke, it was 2011. Yeah, 2011. And end of November, beginning of December, there was this whopping great anomalous SPH spike. We couldn't explain it. So we looked at the data patterns and we allied it with what's going on. Was it like World Food Day? Was it like, you know, Bake a Cake Day? Why did this book go mental? And we had to widen it out a bit, think outside the box, and we put it against different calendar events. Does anybody want to hazard a guess as to what this was? Thanksgiving. Close. It was Hanukkah. So Salt, Sugar, Smoke about food preservatives, although it wasn't a kosher book explicitly, those are all methods of preserving food used in kosher cooking. So what we discovered that this book was being sold like #1 Hanukkah present ever. So there you go. That was a big surprise to us and a surprise to our client as a publisher. You'd think that they knew that, but that was a surprise to them as well. So there's the story in that. We then had to create marketing content around that and get the content distributed. But that's the ideation. That was finding the story in the data. So don't discount using an infographic just because everybody else does. The important thing is to tell a better story than everyone else. And to do that, with your metametrics, to find what normal looks like first. What's the normal pattern of sales? Talk to your point of sale people. And then when you know what normal looks like, set anomaly filters. You need to be a bit careful and make sure they don't text you at 2 in the morning or, you know, anything like that. Make sure they're sensible, so they're not really sensitive and going off all the time. So create your anomaly filters, and when your filters are triggered, that's generally where your story is. The story's in the, that sounds like a sci-fi film. The story's in the anomalous third dimension. Okay, so earning links then, in summary, it really does take a marketing mindset and some marketing skills. And it needs to be part of a holistic business strategy, but actually, if we're doing it right, it will become an integral part of a holistic marketing strategy. But it is integral to growth and success going forward, particularly in the current climate. So if we want to succeed in search, we want to shift more product, we need to embrace this change. Thank you. And there you go. You can get the slides on the site now if you want to. It's on the blog, or should be.